All right, so get this. We're going deep into Skinwalker Valley today.
Ooh, okay.
Ever heard of it?
I have, yeah.
It's this place in Utah that has quite the reputation.
Right.
Think like UFOs, cattle mutilations, even shape-shifting creatures.
Oh, wow.
Basically, if it's paranormal,
Yeah.
Skinwalker Valley has probably got it.
It really does seem to have it all, doesn't it?
It does.
The Uinta Basin, which is where Skinwalker Valley is,
Right.
it's really become this landmark in the world of the unexplained.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, you send us some pretty fascinating sources.
Yeah.
We've got online discussions about a paranormal investigation episode that was set in Skinwalker Valley.
Yeah.
And we've got a description of the episode itself.
Yeah, and the discussions online, they're buzzing about this.
Oh, right.
It's pretty interesting. So what we're going to try and do today is piece together
Okay.
all the highlights, the skepticism, the weirdness,
Yeah.
and see if we can, like, make sense of it all, you know?
Right. Try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. What do you say? We just start with the episode itself.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So the episode is from a show called Expedition X,
Okay.
which, as you might have guessed, is all about
Yeah.
investigating these paranormal hotspots.
Right.
And this one aired September 13th of this year,
Okay.
focused entirely on Skinwalker Valley.
Wow. And so I have to say, even just the episode description
Yeah,
is like a greatest hits of paranormal phenomena.
it is.
I mean, UFO sightings, cattle mutilations, shape-shifting creatures.
It's all there.
It's all there.
And the Reddit threads about it are wild.
Really?
People are talking about a mysterious hitchhiker who just vanished,
Oh, wow.
strange thermal readings in the snow,
Oh.
and a potential UFO caught on camera.
Sounds like they hit all the classic tropes.
They did.
Let's start with the hitchhiker.
Okay.
These kinds of stories, I feel like, always capture people's imaginations.
They do. There's this one comment where someone says they spotted the hitchhiker in the show and that they had legs that are all fur. How creepy is that?
That is a little unsettling.
Yeah.
But you do have to consider the context.
Okay.
Skinwalker Valley is in a pretty remote part of Utah.
Right.
It's
Right.
not out of the realm of possibility that, somebody might be wearing some heavy winter gear that could kind of look like fur from a distance.
That's true.
Yeah,
Although I gotta admit, the furry-legged creature theory is definitely more exciting.
of course.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Sometimes the simplest explanation is the most likely one.
Okay, point taken. But what about those weird thermal readings?
Oh, yeah.
People in the Reddit thread were freaking out about warm snow showing up on the thermal camera, even though it was freezing outside.
Yeah, that is interesting. Without more information, it's hard to say for sure
Yeah.
what caused that. Thermal cameras can be sensitive
Okay.
to various environmental factors, so
Yeah.
it's possible there was something else going on.
So you're saying it could be a technical thing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a paranormal.
Exactly. It's important to rule out all those possible conventional explanations
Right.
before we jump to the paranormal.
Right. And that makes sense. But even if it's not paranormal,
Yeah.
it's still pretty strange,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
There are plenty of unexplained phenomena in the world
Okay.
that don't necessarily have anything to do with the paranormal.
Fair enough. But moving on, let's talk about the UFO sighting.
Okay.
That's a big one, especially in a place like Skinwalker Valley.
Right.
And there's one commenter who thinks that the UAP making the crazy jump on camera might just be the camera moving.
They might be right. And it's worth noting that UAP,
Okay.
which stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon,
Okay.
has become the preferred term over UFO in recent years.
Interesting.
And I think that reflects kind of a more scientific approach to studying these sightings.
Okay. Yeah.
Acknowledging that not every unexplained object in the sky is necessarily an alien spacecraft.
That makes sense. So even experts are being more cautious these days.
Absolutely. And to the commenter's point, camera movement or other visual artifacts
Right.
can often create the illusion of an object moving erratically,
Yeah.
when in reality it might be stationary or moving in a predictable way.
So even with all the technology we have today,
Yeah.
it's still tough to get definitive proof of something like a UFO.
Precisely.
Yeah.
There's always the possibility of misinterpretation,
Yeah.
human error,
Right.
or even equipment malfunction.
Yeah.
That's why it's so crucial to analyze these sightings with a critical eye, considering all the possible explanations.
All right. You've convinced me. I'll try to keep my alien enthusiast side in check.
That's all we can ask for.
Okay.
A healthy dose of skepticism is always a good thing when you're dealing with the unknown.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's take a quick look at what some of the more skeptical folks in the Reddit thread are saying.
Yeah.
One commenter was questioning the whole premise of paranormal investigation shows,
Uh-huh.
especially the timing of events, saying that it all seemed a little too convenient for entertainment purposes.
That's a valid point, and it's a criticism that's often leveled at these types of shows.
Yeah.
There's a natural tension there
Right.
between creating entertaining television and conducting a rigorous investigation.
So how do you think these shows should balance those two things?
Yeah.
Is it even possible?
It's a tough challenge.
Yeah.
I think ideally, these shows would prioritize transparency,
Okay.
clearly outlining their methodologies and acknowledging the limitations of their investigations.
I guess that would make them a little less exciting to watch, though, right?
Perhaps,
Mm.
but I think there's an audience out there that appreciates a more nuanced and balanced approach to paranormal investigations.
Okay.
One that acknowledges the mystery
Yeah.
while also adhering to scientific principles.
That's an interesting thought. Maybe there's a way to make responsible paranormal investigation
Yeah.
just as captivating
Right.
as the more sensationalized versions.
I believe there is.
I like that optimism.
Well, it's important to remain hopeful that we can explore these topics
Yeah.
with both curiosity and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay, I'm on board with that. Speaking of exploring, one commenter brought up another show
Okay.
called Blind Frog Ranch
Okay.
and mentioned that there were some similar drawings from that show, possibly in the same area as Skinwalker Valley.
Interesting.
What do you make of that?
It's fascinating how these connections, whether real or imagined,
Yeah.
tend to fuel the fascination with these locations.
Yeah.
People love to draw parallels
Right.
and kind of weave together a larger narrative.
It's like a giant puzzle where everyone's trying to find the missing pieces.
Exactly. And in the case of Skinwalker Valley, it seems like there are a lot of pieces to be found.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So I guess the big question is, what do we make of all of this?
Yeah.
Is Skinwalker Valley really as paranormal as it's made out to be?
Right.
Or are there more down-to-earth explanations for everything that goes on there?
I mean, that's what we're here to explore. And ultimately, I think it comes down to how much weight you as the listener want to give to anecdotal evidence versus scientific explanations.
You know what? That's a great way to frame it. So let's dive into some more specific details from these sources and see what we can uncover.
Okay, let's do it. It's interesting you mentioned the weight of anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
The history of Skinwalker Ranch,
Right.
which is located within Skinwalker Valley.
Yeah.
That adds another layer to this whole discussion.
Oh, yeah. The ranch, that's where a lot of the really intense stories come from, right?
Exactly.
Like the shape-shifting creature thing?
Exactly. The ranch has been the subject of numerous books and documentaries.
Yeah.
And it's really become synonymous with the idea of Skinwalker Valley as this paranormal hotspot.
Okay, so for those who might not be familiar with like the Skinwalker Ranch lore,
Right.
can you give us a little background?
Of course. So the ranch gained notoriety in the 1990s
Okay.
when a family who owned the property reported this series of really bizarre and frightening events,
Okay.
including UFO sightings, cattle mutilations, and encounters with strange creatures.
And those creatures, that's where the Skinwalker name comes from, right?
Yes, in Navajo folklore,
Okay.
a skinwalker is a malevolent witch who can shapeshift into different animal forms.
So these stories have roots in Native American traditions.
They do.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's important to approach these stories with respect and sensitivity to the cultural beliefs that they represent.
Absolutely. I mean, regardless of whether you believe in skinwalkers or not,
Right.
these stories have been passed down for generations, so
Yeah.
there must be something to them, right?
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Stories often reflect deeper truths about a culture's understanding of the world
Yeah.
and the forces that shape it.
That's a really good point. So let's go back to the Expedition X episode
Okay.
and that furry leg hitchhiker.
Right.
The Reddit thread was full of speculation about what it could be, but nobody really had like a definitive answer. What are your thoughts?
Well, if we set aside the more outlandish theories, like the Skinwalker idea,
Yeah.
there are a few possibilities.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, it could simply be someone bundled up in heavy winter gear,
Right.
but there's also the possibility of it being a wild animal.
Like what, a bear?
Possibly, or even a large dog,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the lighting and the distance.
Right.
It's not always easy to identify an animal with certainty.
That's true, but I feel like people would be able to tell the difference between a bear and a person,
Yeah,
even in the dark.
you'd think so.
Yeah.
But eyewitness accounts can be surprisingly unreliable,
Okay.
especially in situations that are stressful or unexpected.
Okay, so maybe it was just a case of mistaken identity.
It's certainly a possibility, but without more information, it's hard to say for sure.
Fair enough. But I think this brings up an interesting point about how we perceive the world,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to things that we can't easily explain.
Right.
Like if you're already in a place like Skinwalker Valley with all of its paranormal baggage,
Right.
you might be more inclined to see things that aren't really there or
Yeah.
to interpret things in a way that fits your preconceived notions.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the world around us,
Right.
and sometimes they fill in the gaps
Yeah.
with information that might not be accurate.
So you're saying that our own expectations can influence what we see and hear?
Absolutely. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
It means that reality is, to some extent, subjective.
In a way, yes, our perceptions are filtered through our own experiences, beliefs, and expectations.
Okay, so let's apply that to Skinwalker Valley.
Okay.
If people go there expecting to see something paranormal,
Right.
they might be more likely to interpret anything unusual
Yeah.
as evidence to support that belief.
Exactly. And that can create a self-reinforcing cycle
Okay.
where more and more people report strange experiences,
Yeah.
further cementing the reputation of the place as paranormal.
So it's kind of like a feedback loop.
Precisely.
That's fascinating, but doesn't that make it even harder to figure out what's really going on
Right.
in a place like Skinwalker Valley?
Hmm.
I mean, how can you separate genuine paranormal activity from people's imaginations running wild?
That's the challenge, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
It requires a careful and critical examination of the evidence, taking into account all the possible explanations,
Right.
including psychological factors.
I guess that's where a healthy dose of skepticism comes in handy.
It does.
But how skeptical should we be?
Right.
I mean, is there ever a point where we can say, okay, this is just too weird to be explained?
Yeah.
By conventional means, there must be something else going on here?
That's a tough question, personally. I believe it's important to remain open to the possibility that there are things in the universe that we don't yet understand.
So you're not ruling out the paranormal entirely?
Not at all.
Mm.
But I also believe that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So if someone tells me they saw a UFO, I'm going to want to see more than just their word for it.
All right.
I'm going to want to see photos, videos, radar data, anything that can corroborate their story.
That's a fair point. So where does that leave us with Skinwalker Valley?
I think it's a place that deserves further study. There's clearly something going on there, whether it's paranormal or not.
Yeah.
And until we have more concrete evidence, the mystery will continue to intrigue us.
You know, that's what I love about this topic.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and to grapple with the possibility that there might be things out there that defy our current understanding of the world.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we still have so much to learn.
And sometimes the not knowing is more exciting than the knowing.
Yeah.
Speaking of not knowing, let's go back to those bizarre thermal readings in the Expedition X episode.
Right.
You mentioned that thermal cameras can be sensitive to various environmental factors. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So thermal cameras detect infrared radiation, which is emitted by all objects that have a temperature above absolute zero.
Okay.
The intensity of this radiation is related to the object's temperature. So hotter objects appear brighter on a thermal image.
Okay.
However, there are other factors that can influence the readings,
Okay.
such as the reflectivity of the surface being imaged, the presence of other heat sources in the environment, and even atmospheric conditions.
So it's not always as simple as just pointing the camera at something
Right.
and getting an accurate temperature reading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are a lot of variables to consider.
Okay, so back to the warm snow.
Yeah.
What could have caused that reading besides the snow actually being warmer than the surrounding air?
Well, one possibility is that there was a heat source underneath the snow, such as a geothermal vent or even underground pipes.
Oh, that's interesting. So even if it wasn't paranormal,
Yeah.
it could still be something geologically unusual.
Precisely.
That's pretty cool. Never thought about it that way.
It's always worth considering the geological context when dealing with these types of mysteries.
All right, you've given me a lot to think about, but before we get too far down the geological rabbit hole,
Okay.
I want to touch on another aspect of this episode that caught my attention.
Yeah.
The connection to the show Blind Frog Ranch.
Right.
And those similar drawings you mentioned that people love to draw parallels and create a larger narrative.
They do.
Can you give us some examples of how that's played out with Skinwalker Valley?
Sure. One example is the idea that Skinwalker Valley is located within a region known as the Uinta Basin Vortex.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. What's the story behind the vortex?
Well, it's not a scientific concept.
Okay.
It's more of a folk belief that's gained traction over the years.
Okay.
The idea is that certain areas on Earth have unusual electromagnetic or gravitational properties
Okay.
that attract paranormal phenomena.
So it's kind of like a magnetic field for the weird stuff.
In a way, yes.
Okay. So is there any actual evidence to support the existence of this vortex?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't stop people from believing in it.
And I guess that's part of what makes Skinwalker Valley so fascinating, right?
It is.
It's this intersection of folklore,
Yeah.
science,
Yeah.
and the unexplained.
Exactly. It's a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blur,
Yeah.
leaving us to wonder what's real and what's not.
Well said. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the evidence,
Mm-hmm.
or lack thereof, for
Right.
paranormal activity in Skinwalker Valley.
Right.
But I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the people who report these experiences.
Okay.
What kind of psychological profile might make someone more likely to believe in or experience the paranormal?
That's a complex question, and there's no single answer.
Right?
But some studies have suggested that people who are more open to experience,
Okay.
who have a strong sense of intuition, or who are more prone to fantasy and magical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
might be more likely to report paranormal experiences.
So it's not necessarily about being gullible or easily fooled.
Not necessarily. It might be more about having a different way of perceiving and interpreting the world.
That's interesting. So even if we could definitively debunk every single paranormal claim coming out of Skinwalker Valley,
Right.
there would still be people who would believe, right?
Most likely, yes. Belief systems are complex and often deeply ingrained.
Okay, that makes sense. But I think this brings us back to the question of how much weight we should give to personal experiences when evaluating the paranormal.
Right.
Like if someone tells me they saw a ghost, should I just take their word for it?
Mm-hmm.
Or should I be looking for more concrete evidence?
I think it's always wise to be discerning.
Okay.
Personal experiences can be compelling, but they're also subjective and prone to misinterpretation.
Yeah.
It's important to consider the context, the individual state of mind, and the possibility of other explanations before jumping to conclusions.
All right, so skepticism is key.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want to be so closed-minded that we dismiss anything that falls outside our current understanding of the world.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of balancing those perspectives so far.
I think so.
But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one last point.
Yep.
The idea of Skinwalker Valley as a place of mystery and intrigue.
Right.
What is it about places like this that capture our imaginations?
I think it's the unknown. Humans are naturally curious creatures, and we're drawn to things that we don't understand.
It's like a puzzle waiting to be solved.
Exactly. And in the case of Skinwalker Valley, it's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces.
Which honestly makes it even more intriguing.
It does.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
After hearing all of this, what are your thoughts on Skinwalker Valley?
Do you think it's a genuine paranormal hotspot, or do you think there are more rational explanations for the strange events that have been reported there?
And even more importantly, what would you do if you were to investigate this place? As we've been talking, I keep thinking about those Redditors dissecting that Expedition X episode.
Yeah.
It really seems like everyone has their own theory about what's really going on in Skinwalker Valley.
It's true. And it really highlights the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to the paranormal.
Yeah.
You know, what might seem really convincing to one person
Right.
could be easily dismissed by another.
It's all about perspective, right?
Yeah.
And what you're willing to accept as evidence.
Exactly. And that's what makes these discussions so interesting.
Yeah.
They force us to examine our own beliefs and biases.
Okay, but let's say you're someone who's totally on the fence about this stuff.
Right.
You're not a diehard believer,
Yeah.
but you're not a complete skeptic either.
Right in the middle.
What kind of evidence would it take to convince you
Yeah.
that something truly paranormal is happening in Skinwalker Valley?
For me, it would come down to verifiable, independently corroborated evidence.
Okay.
You know, I'd want to see data from multiple sources
Okay.
collected using rigorous scientific methods that couldn't be explained by any known natural phenomena.
So not just eyewitness accounts or blurry photos?
Right? While those can be intriguing, they're not conclusive proof.
Yeah.
I'd want to see physical evidence, like anomalous readings from scientific instruments,
Okay.
or perhaps even DNA samples that couldn't be matched to any known species.
That makes sense, but what about the argument
Yeah.
that paranormal phenomena, by their very nature, defy scientific measurement?
That's a common argument.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a challenge for researchers in this field.
Yeah.
But I believe that if something is truly interacting with our physical reality,
Okay.
it should leave some kind of measurable trace.
So you're saying even if we can't fully understand it or explain a phenomenon,
Yeah.
we should still be able to detect its effects
Right.
on the world around us.
Exactly. And I think that's where the future of paranormal research lies,
Okay.
in developing new technologies and methodologies that can capture and analyze those subtle effects.
That's fascinating. It sounds like you're optimistic about the potential for science to shed light on the paranormal. I am. I believe that with an open mind and a rigorous approach, we can make progress in understanding these mysteries.
Okay, I like that attitude, but let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
What if, after all the scientific investigation,
Yeah.
we still can't find any concrete evidence for paranormal activity in Skinwalker Valley?
Yeah.
Does that mean it's all just a bunch of hooey?
Not necessarily. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence.
Okay.
It just means we haven't found the right way to look for it yet.
So the mystery remains.
For now, yes, and that's okay. Sometimes the not knowing is more intriguing than the knowing.
You know, you're right. It's the unanswered questions that keep us coming back for more.
It is.
It is. So for all of you listening out there, whether you're tuning in from your couch, from your car, during your commute,
Yeah.
we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Skinwalker Valley.
I know I have.
It's a truly fascinating place,
Right.
a place that sparks the imagination and leaves us with a sense of wonder.
Yeah, it really makes you think. It does, and at the end of the day, that's what we're all about here, exploring these mysteries, questioning what we think we know, and hopefully expanding our understanding of the world around us.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
So until next time, keep those minds open, keep those questions coming, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.